So is there a motion?
Second.
All right. So state what the motion is, so for the record, because I can't make a motion.
Move for executive session to discuss contract with the Republic.
Thank you. It's been seconded by, okay, Ms. Johnson.
We can't do this at the end, Mr. Chairman?
No, sir, because this is going to come up, I believe, in our environmental management meeting, right? I can move it to the,
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Not, Mr. Darby, with all due respect, I would prefer to have it at the beginning of the meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
because he has somewhere to be.
Yes, that's fine, sir. That's fine, sir.
All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Brantley is the chairman of that committee. I think he's here.
Yeah, he's there.
There you go. All right, I just want to make sure he was
I
going to.
wouldn't do it without him.
I just want to make sure he'd be.
So we're going to adjourn the executive session. We should be back shortly.
Everything says 4:55 all over the building.
Making up for lost time.
I just wanted to make sure.
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Go right ahead. Let me get the door for you, too. John. Mr. Darby has got to go, so if you can, since we got that information, hold your meeting until after we go to the Finance Committee. Yeah, let's do finance first.
That's fine. Yeah, we have no action in environmental management, so if you'd like to clean up finance first, that'd be fine, Mr. Pryor.
Okay. All right, so in executive session, we received legal and advice, and no action was taken. So now we're going to move to our Finance Committee agenda, where we have 4 items on the agenda. So, Mr. Darby, item number 1 is the minutes of September 15, 2022. What is the pleasure? Is there a second? Second by, can y'all speak into the mic so they can pick it up? Turn your mics on, please. Second by Ms. Johnson, moved by Ms. Sunnycott. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. Item 2, A through H, consent agenda. What is the pleasure?
Approval to A through H.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Moody. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Item 3, A, B, C, and D. Moved by Ms. Johnson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Reverend Milton. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. All right, now we move to item 4, which is a presentation from our consultant, Mr. Tootin. Whoever you want to put in charge of this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With us this evening, we have our consultants for the 995 Morrison planning process that are going to present to you several options for moving forward, and I will turn it directly over to them.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Consultant, you're on air.
Great. Thank you, everyone. My name is Matt Wetley. I'm a principal at Development Strategies, and I am joined by Justin Carney and Brian Licari. The 3 of us have been working on this analysis over the past month and are eager to share with you all the findings. So first, I am going to share my screen. It says the host needs to enable participant screen sharing. So while you all are working on that, I'll say that our practice, we take great pride in assessing the different alternatives that communities can take with their various land assets, looking at things through the lens of markets and, let's see. Looks like I can share now. Great. Now we'll do full screen. All right. Okay, we're all set. So we really take great pride in sharing land, potential land use decisions and their impacts on place, on economics, on markets, and on policy, and how these things can also influence the development of a site. And most importantly, we want to always make sure that decision makers are made aware of the full breadth of decisions and ramifications and pros and cons that exist, so that you can make the most informed decision for your community. With that, we have a brief presentation. There's a lot of information and detailed analysis that went into this. We've made every effort to distill it into a high-level analysis that arrives at a decision matrix, essentially, for you all to look at and make the most informed decision possible. Sorry, it's skipping around on me here. There we go. So first off, looking at the site, 8 acres on the peninsula in a neighborhood in which the economy is rapidly growing, and great assets and great potential assets on the way. This is a site that, it's a large scale, and it represents an opportunity to do some development of some kind that is close to a future transit station, that is close to a park amenity, parking, and has an adjacency to kind of a larger PUD development in the future. And all of this, translates into a site that has the ability to put a number of people closer to jobs, higher quality of life with a park, and possibly support businesses with adjacent parking. And so all of this has great policy implications in addition to having economic potential for the county. As we zoom in, it's, as I said, it's roughly 8 acres. And this is actually a very large site, very large relative to a typical block size in the community. So one of the first assumptions we made was that a street network would be created to better integrate this site into the city grid and the neighborhood. So we assumed a north and south street and an east and west street. And this would have effectively amount to the creation of 4 development sites out of this 8 acres, as well as a new circulation network. And a few concepts I want to share. One, when we're looking at any high quality development in any community needs to essentially satisfy 4 criteria. There has to be market opportunity. We want to understand what the site capacity is and the opportunity for placemaking. We need to understand the economics, and it needs to satisfy certain economic criteria. And we're also often looking to satisfy certain policy goals for the community. And so with that in mind, when we're looking at this site...
Before you move on,
Yes.
it's only 6 acres that the county owns, okay? It's not 8. The other 2 acres were sold to this developer who's going to develop Laurel Island. And so they're going to put a bridge to cross over into Laurel Island. So we only own 6 acres.
2 3-acre parcels.
Okay.
So I don't know if you had that all figured in your presentation, but it is 8 acres, but we sold 2.
Mr. Chairman, I think those 2 acres basically are kind of what they've got on this slide, though, at least the cool blow part of it. I think my understanding is that parcel that was carved out is basically what's represented on this slide. It's Cool Blow Street.
Yeah, and I think that's where the bridge is going to go.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And the parcel along the bottom part, along next to the marsh, there's a right of way there.
But I thought some of that was to be preserved as like a park or green space.
What they don't use under the bridge construction after they finish picking up all the laid out material, yes.
Right.
Go ahead, sir. Just wanted you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, I'm happy to report that we did take that into consideration. That's, essentially we're starting out with 8 acres and we're assuming we're subtracting a certain amount of that land area for right of way for streets and utilities. And again, we made a lot of high level assumptions in a month, usually in a pre-development phase, which usually follows something like this, get into a lot more detail. But yes, we took into account that it was kind of the way we're looking at it. You start with 8 acres and then you start subtracting out, right of way for streets and roads and then arrive at a buildable envelope. So that's what we did. I don't think it'll impact this analysis excessively. So, looking at these 4 boxes, in terms of market analysis, the most important thing to understand is that there's ample demand for both market rate and affordable housing. In terms of site and place, we made those assumptions just as we did, that there would be some infrastructure added and that would reduce the full buildable area. We made assumptions that would be done in a way that is contributive to place and helps integrate not only the community, but the adjacent, PUD site. A lot of the focus of this analysis is really on economic feasibility and, looking at construction costs, operating expenses, private finance and risk metrics to understand the value of this site. But we also took into account policy tools, low-income housing tax credits, and other affordable housing tools, and how that could impact development of this site as well. So a couple of key concepts before we get into the numbers. One is land value and development feasibility. So if you look at this bar chart on the left-hand side, market rate development, it occurs when the revenue through rents and it is such that the amount of private financing available is equal to or greater than the cost of construction, and as well as and also it covers the cost of the purchase price for the land. And as we move over, as we look at affordable housing, usually what we're doing is charging lower rents, and that means less private financing is available, usually less than what it costs to construct the building. And so usually there's a gap, a financial gap that requires use of often public incentives if the project is to be made viable. And what that typically does in terms of land value is it greatly reduces the value of the land unless public finance tools or affordable housing tools can be added back in to bridge that gap. Okay, so it's at a high level, it's a concept. You're going to see different land values from different scenarios, market rate and affordability. And a lot of this is impacted by how much rent is being charged to make something affordable, to hit different affordability targets for different households. Development feasibility is very complex. There's a lot of different assumptions that we made pertaining to rents and construction costs and land values and so on and so forth. And we did all this at a high level in a month. And like any developer would to assess a project, there's another level of detail that typically occurs in a pre-development phase. But we made reasonable assumptions, talked to folks in the development community, used our methods of appraisal to come up with reasonable costs. And I won't go through all those with you today in the interest of time. I do just want to share two major concepts that impact value. One is different types of parking. And there's a lot of examples on the peninsula on the right-hand side, structured parking. And this is what is used to support, the sort of 7-8 story density or height that we see with a lot of recent developments. It's very dependent on that structured parking. And this is a very expensive way of parking people that's only viable in a market rate option. So there aren't examples of affordable housing that use this structure. Instead, what we're seeing is, and not just in Charleston, but other places, affordable housing at its densest makes use of podium parking, which is where the first story is parking, and then you put housing on top of that, and that can usually support maybe a 3 or 4 story density. So you're going to see market rate housing in some scenarios at a higher density than affordable housing because of the underlying structure of parking and construction costs. The other major concept is the availability of affordable housing incentives, and in particular, low-income housing tax credits, or LIHTC. And generally, there are finite amounts or limits to the amount of tax credits that are awarded to a single project. And so that limits the number of housing units that a developer or development can allow or build. So what we've seen, some very recent examples are LIHTC awards of around 7 to 8 million. And this translates into an ability to develop, between 55 and 70 units of affordable housing. And so what that means is, and so we made some reasonable assumptions. No site can secure LIHTC awards every year. We made an assumption that this site could secure 4 awards over a course of 10 years, that totaling 30 million. These are reasonable assumptions, and that would translate into 200 affordable units. And that's important because in market rate scenarios, we did site capacity analysis, and 8-story buildings could accommodate 1,200 units. So you're going to see some scenarios that have market rate scenarios that have a lot more units than the affordable scenarios. And the reason is there is a limit to the amount of incentives available to do affordable housing, and no amount of subsidy of the land value is going to achieve that higher, that market rate capacity for affordable units. I'm going to walk you through this. I'll walk you through this a little more and illustrate that a little bit. But essentially, we're evaluating three scenarios. One is market rate, one is affordable, and then one is a hybrid mix of those two things. And so here are the scenarios from left to right. Number one, market rate development. You can see conceptually, and I'm trying to get my cursor over here. There's an assumed street running north to south and east to west. And it essentially is created for development sites on which market rate housing could be developed at, and we assumed an 8-story density and made reasonable assumptions about parking ratios for that. We have another scenario in which we take the 200 affordable housing units that we think could be, could make use of the affordable housing tax credit program, and that is enough to essentially build out one block of this development. So that's a key takeaway. There aren't enough tools to build affordable housing on this entire site over a period of a decade. And so what we did is we looked at another scenario where you made maximum use of those tools, affordable housing tools, built out a quarter of the site with those 200 units, and then looked at some scenarios in which market rate housing went on the remainder of the property. And so what that translates into in terms of site capacity, I'm going to share economics in a minute, but just pure site capacity, what can you fit on this site? On the left-hand side, assuming 8-story buildings, 2 structured parking garages, that would translate into 1,200 market rate units, as well as almost 50,000 square feet of retail. And that would have 1,700 parking spaces to support that. Affordable housing, again, as I said, we estimate there's enough affordable housing tools to support 200 units of what we would call kind of deeply affordable housing at 30%, a mix of 30% and 60% AMI units. And that would, as well as 16,000 square feet of retail, essentially enough to build out 1/4 of this site. And then we did a hybrid mix of these, right? And so we have arrived at a third scenario in which, again, we build out 200 units of affordable housing and, create use the maximum 8-story density of market rate housing on the other 3 remaining sites. And that translates into a little over 1,000 total units. So now I want to walk through the economics of these 3 scenarios for you all. The first one is the market rate scenario, again, 1,200 units. And if you were to sell this land or do a long-term ground lease, the value of that, maxing out that density at 8 stories, would be approximately $35 million. So that is the market value of this land in a market rate scenario.
I agree with that.
And we wanted to share with you a second scenario as a thought exercise. If instead you took the value of that land and contributed that to the development project. In other words, you had a development partner and you said, hey, we will lease this land to you for $1. What they could do is then take that money and underwrite 200 what we call workforce units. So units affordable at 80% of AMI. So in other words, as a thought exercise, you can see how you could do a pure market rate sale and sell this for $35 million, or you could effectively take that $35 million, contribute that to the project, and a developer that would then help them underwrite and subsidize 200 workforce units. And so this gives you a sense of how you can negotiate and leverage the value of the land, should you choose to. Not saying that you should or shouldn't, but we're saying should you choose to, you could contribute all of the value of the land, or you could choose to contribute some value of the land to make some of the units attainable to as workforce housing at 80% of AMI. Now, to get to more affordable units at 60% of AMI and 30% of AMI, this is going to require use of other tools, LIHTC, as we discussed, and for the 60% AMI units, and for the 30% AMI units that require use of a tool like project-based voucher. This is something that would require a partnership with the housing authority, where they would bring essentially rent vouchers to the table that would provide a revenue subsidy for the operators of that affordable housing. And again, we think, making reasonable assumptions, there would be enough to do about 200 units. So 1/4 of the site that would be podium parked. And so then we looked at a third scenario, really, and I'll share, two versions of this third scenario, in which you make use of those tools, LIHTC and project-based vouchers, partner with the housing authority, develop those 200 units at 60% and 30% AMI, and then allow for the development of the remainder of the site as market rate. So in essence, you would be contributing the value of 1/4 of the land to that affordable project to make that possible. And then you could still engage in a land sale or a long-term ground lease that would amount to effectively $25 million. So in other words, you could still recoup the value for 3/4 of the site by selling it as market rate, and contribute 1/4 of the, roughly $10 million of value for this one site to make that more deeply affordable. There's one other scenario to share, and I'm going to come back and show you all of these side by side as part of a decision matrix. There's one other scenario in which you could donate, essentially, or you could contribute the full value of the land to the project for the entirety of the site. And what that would do, again, this part is 200 units of affordable, but now for this market rate component, you could require or negotiate with the developer to make 110 of those units affordable at an 80% AMI level. So what that would do is give you the greatest diversity of units affordable at 100% of AMI, 80% of AMI, 60 and 30. That would be the most complex deal structure with the greatest amount of partnerships. And so now I want to put all these, I've got a couple slides where I want to put all of these on the same page for you all together to look at. So we've got essentially a couple versions of a market rate scenario. We have an affordable scenario and a mixed income scenario. So the market rate scenarios, again, you have one where it's essentially a sale or a land lease as market rate to a developer. And, roughly 1,200 units could be accommodated for a sale of $35 million. You could contribute all of the value of that property to a project and get 200 80% AMI units, by offering that land subsidy to the project. And by the way, you could do a portion of the land. You could take some of the value of the land and contribute some of it to the project. It would just reduce the number of workforce units that could be possible. Item 2, fully affordable, right? So this is where 1/4 of the land is developed using LIHTC and project-based vouchers through partnership with the housing authority. And 1/4 of the site could be built out, and you would be effectively contributing the value of that 1/4 of the value of the land to that project as a land subsidy to make that possible. And then really the 2 hybrid scenarios, which require a little more complex deal structuring, but it's kind of a happy medium or a middle way approach of the two, where again you would do 1/4 of the site using LIHTC and project-based vouchers, so you get 200 units of affordable housing, deeply affordable housing. Develop the rest as market rate, and receive a return either through a long-term ground lease or a sale of $25 million. Or again, you could contribute that $25 million to the project, and that would translate into 110 units that are affordable at 80% of AMI. So again, you can see how different deal structures and different ways in which you could leverage, you could either, take the return for the land, or a portion of a return for the land, or contribute, varying degrees of land value to the project, to diversify the affordability levels on the project. So I'm going to come back to a slide very similar to this in a second, but oops, I'm sorry, it's bouncing around. But before I do, just coming back to those four things. So again, market support, there's market support for affordable and market rate. This is a very desirable site. It's close to jobs. It's close to public space. It's desirable. That's why it's so expensive, right? That's why rents are so expensive. And so there's plenty of market demand for whatever you do, or whatever is done on the site, so long as it can be financially underwritten. Site in place, as we said, we made certain assumptions about public right-of-way and how much space that would occupy, as well as reasonable assumptions about parking and how that impacts the feasibility of a project. We shared with you kind of the outcome of the resulting land values from some different scenarios, both market rate and affordable, and how that translates into price. And then as we think about policy and goals, things like affordability, access to jobs, neighborhood revitalization, equity, and the use of programs and tools, I wanted to add one layer of kind of analysis to like the degree to which these different scenarios would contribute to various policy goals of the community. And so we're using kind of a star rating, a 4-star rating, right? So you know what the economics are of these different scenarios. I shared that. And, we wanted to provide a policy rating effectively. And so, the market rate scenario, we want to point out, even doing market rate housing, 100% market rate housing would accomplish some policy goals on this site. You're putting people closer to jobs in your community. That's taking cars off the road. If they're taking transit, it's putting them close to a park. That's contributive to quality of life. There are benefits to doing that, but the policy benefits increase as you start to come up with affordable and mixed income scenarios that increase the diversity of units that are offered and the attainability of this development to households at different affordability levels in your community. It's a great site. It puts people close to, culture, quality of life, jobs, walkability, and all of those things. And as we kind of like move from market rate to affordable to mixed income, it puts you in a position to, contribute more from a policy perspective. But the returns are not the same, right?
Sir, just 1 second. I think Mr. Darby wants to chime in.
Mr. Bryan, can we perhaps vote on this not tonight, but perhaps on Tuesday, sir? I don't necessarily.
We're going to do a special finance meeting on Tuesday. It'll go along with our regular council. I know you got to leave, so.
I mean, based upon this, I find it quite slanted, really, in terms of what we can do with affordability in terms of 1/4. It's almost upsetting, really, to even come up with something. But I think it's skewed, it's slanted, and it's biased. And I think we can do much better in terms of affordability, sir. Really, this is upsetting, sir.
All right, well, you'll have a chance to weigh in
Thank
on
you, sir.
Tuesday. Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so this is actually the last slide in our presentation. So we wanted to share this with you. We're happy to take this wherever you all would like to go with this, answer any questions that you have. We kind of wanted to put these all on the same slide for you all to be able to compare these scenarios, which are kind of the result of our economic analysis and the degree to which we could make reasonable assumptions using the tools, affordable housing tools that are available to maximize the amount of affordable housing on some of these scenarios. And we wanted to share this with you, give you an opportunity to ask any questions you have of us about these.
Okay, I'm going to start to my right. Reverend Middleton, you got anything?
Well, I have a lot of things. I think I'm going to just yield at this time. I'm absorbing this. It's the first time I've seen it. Certainly going to the ratings, the policy ratings that have been given. And I saw something via email that was sent that sort of contradicts some of this. So let me just, because I saw another presentation that was sent that, contemplated full affordability at many more units, than what I'm seeing on this presentation here tonight. So I want to, sort of cross-reference some things before I make a statement.
Okay, you know your thoughts for Tuesday if you want to. Mr. Swears?
One thing I caution you on, Mr. Chairman, is that we not basically diminish the whole system we have, which is committees make some choices, and then you have 5 days, and then council finalizes that choice. I really don't think it's wise to do both in one day. So I'm cautious about us punting this today. We make a decision Tuesday, then we finalize that decision on Tuesday. So I caution you on that. But also, as I've mentioned before, and really this is for Mr. Davis, for me, affordable housing is probably going to come down to taxpayer dollars, county taxpayer dollars per unit. And if those numbers don't work, then it's just not the right place. I am very concerned that this might not be the right place. I know there are folks in those neighborhoods that are being displaced, and I get that. I feel for them. All across Charleston County, there are neighborhoods where folks grew up there and can't afford to live there. I'm one of those. I can't afford to live where I grew up. That's a fact of life. Whether it's high income, low income, no matter what it is, in that respect, we are victims of our success. So to me, this program will come down to taxpayer cost per unit. And there are some areas where it just might not work. The other thing is, I do believe in dispersing affordable housing across, I think, primarily urban areas, but also some rural areas. I like the thought of dispersing it and not concentrating it. So those are the two things I will focus on: taxpayer cost per unit, and also avoiding concentrating it all on, try to fix it all on one site. I don't think that will work. So those are my thoughts at this point. Am I ready to commit to moving forward on something tonight or even Tuesday with 995 Morrison? I don't think I'm even close.
Comments, Mr. Swears, Ms. Honeycutt?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First of all, thank you to our consultant. I know this took time to prepare, so we do appreciate the effort you put into this. What I am a little confused about is I don't see any cost associated with this. So in your analysis, were you told not to provide anything that would cost the county? In other words, you have 25 million, 35 million that we could make on the land, and then you have break evens associated with the land subsidy, which is us giving the value of the land, but not dollars. It looks like there's an attempt here to bring sort of a public-private partnership in that regard, but that maybe your parameter was that the county not actually spend dollars constructing the housing. Was that a parameter?
I can answer that actually. Yes, we did. I personally did not feel comfortable asking them to estimate anything where the county was coming out of its pocket. So we knew what the land was worth, and they were free to experiment with that land value. Obviously, if the county were willing or desiring to spend money on more affordable units, then more affordable units could be placed on the site. But I did not authorize them to go forward and with any scenarios that included county expenditures.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. That clears that up a lot. With respect to the break even on just the affordable, are we talking about in that scenario just giving up that 1/4, and then is there a value associated with the remaining 3/4?
Yeah, yes, the remaining 3/4 would be worth 25 million.
Okay. So in the affordable only scenario, we still have a value of 25 million on the remaining land if it was sold fair market.
Exactly. Yes.
Those are the only questions I have. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, Ms. Johnson?
I'm just gonna hold my questions until Tuesday, please.
Mr. Sass?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some questions. I agree with some of your numbers there on maybe the number market rate, 35 million, and y'all have done a lot of work, I can tell. Are we going to get a copy of this study? I mean, I'd like to study this. I'd like to really get a chance to look at these numbers and be able to talk to some people about it. There's a lot here, and this is a valuable asset that the county owns. obviously, and so we need to really take the time to get into this and digest this and figure out where we are. And I appreciate what you said, Mr. Davis. And, I think that we're asking good questions right now. And I know that the more we study this, we will have more questions. And I don't think this is something we can make a decision on in a week. Like I said, this is a very valuable piece of property. And so we gotta figure it all out. We gotta take a little time and look at it and figure it out. I'm not saying it's 6 months or 6 weeks or what, but, I know I need to look at this and spend some time on it before I'm gonna feel comfortable.
You can ask for a copy and they'll provide you a copy.
Thank you.
As a matter of fact, provide each council member with a copy. Yes, sir. All right, thank you. Mr. Moody?
Mr. Pryor, and thank you, Mr. Welty. Just a couple of observations. Number one, I was very surprised to hear about the lack of subsidies given current political attention to affordable workforce housing. The numbers that were up there were, that's not chump change, but I was surprised at the comment that there's very limited lack. I think you call it light-see funds. I was just surprised about that. I'm sorry that Mr. Darby left, but the math is, I haven't dug too deeply into it, but these projects, you can only build what a net operating income will support. And if the NOI via the rent times the number of units is nothing, it supports nothing. So that's why the market rate or the mixed income, you can do more units because you've got higher income rates. So if your desire is to have as much affordable housing as possible, there's not enough money in this county to do that. So I just make that statement because it's based on the NOI, and if the NOI is nothing, there's nothing you can do. One comment, Mr. Welty, you made was that the functional or parks aspect would also support the PUD for Laurel Island. Not that this parcel shouldn't have functional or park aspects to it, but I would not. Laurel Island has got tons of affordable workforce housing. They've got tons of green space. They've got tons of functional space built into that PUD. So I don't think we need to allocate a ton of space for that community. For our site, maybe yes, but I don't think we need to be planning to house any functional or fun space for PUD for Laurel Island, because they're going to have plenty of it across the bridge. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's it.
Okay, Mr. Worthing.
I just want to clarify one thing. In our scenario, we didn't assume public space on our site. We're drawing attention to the fact that it's right next to a park, and so putting a lot of housing next to the park, it was a policy asset. So I just wanted to clarify that. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, but just wanted to make sure you understood. Just across the bridge in Laurel Island, they have tons of amenities and tons of everything over there. So we don't necessarily need to be eating up space over here for that. My opinion. Right. Thank you.
Mr. Worthing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you as well, Mr. Wetley, and thank you to the folks at Development Strategies. I think some of this has already been answered, but so in looking at the all affordable version, and I think this is what Councilwoman Honeycutt was asking. So that is basically, on some level, am I correct in understanding that option 2 and option 3A are essentially the same thing? It's just whether you build market rate on the other 3 parcels. Is that a fair way to characterize it? Okay.
Yes.
And I think you've kind of alluded to this by saying that there'd be multiple partners and such. So it's not the same person building on all 4, I guess, parcels or quadrants or whatever we're going to call this thing. Is that correct?
Probably, yes. Conceivably, you could have multiple partners developing affordable components of this, market rate components. Correct.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm just trying to think of sort of, well, I'm just trying to envision how this thing gets built, because it does sound complicated, but it is a great asset, obviously, to the county. And, I certainly want to make sure that we keep it that way. I guess that leads me maybe to my last question, which is, we'd sent sort of some suggested parameters. I think I can infer from the presentation that some of those were probably deemed not feasible. I do think you referenced, though, the ground lease aspect. How does that factor in? Can I assume that all of these options are equally available under a full-on sale of the property versus a ground lease?
The short answer is yes. we did evaluate at a high level, really for comparative analysis, the value of these properties, and a ground lease would essentially be structured in such a way that it amounted to a present value that's equal to the value of the sale. We assumed that there would be a desire by the county to retain the underlying asset. But yeah, both could be, further explored as part in a pre-development process, at your discretion.
Okay. And it sounds like this is going to be revisited on Tuesday. I just wanted to clarify one other thing. Do we know what is the market rate right now, out of curiosity, and sort of what band of AMI would that likely be targeting?
I'm going to let Brian Licari, who's at the ready with our analysis, answer that.
Yeah, it can depend on unit size, where the rents and AMI levels can differ by units, but we're effectively, market rate is just a little bit higher than 120% AMI. A little bit. I mean, it's maybe 5 to 7% higher. So that's effectively what market rate is. And so when we think about what workforce housing is, it's really 80%, 100%. Once you get to 120% to maybe 130%, you're effectively at market rate.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Hey, Ms. Honeycutt, follow up?
Thank you. I apologize. There were a few things that came to mind. Do we know, is this parcel within an opportunity zone? And have we looked at any incentives related to that?
It should be, because the building right next door to it is an opportunity zone.
That's what I thought.
I'm pretty sure.
All right. I think the answer is yes. I would like to see that analysis factored in. Next is, have we done any analysis of the revenue that would be generated from a tax standpoint?
No, that was not part of the exercise. Sorry.
If we did the land subsidy, I would really like to know what those values are, what that brings to, well, in any scenario, I'd like to know what, based on the units that we're anticipating, the value of those units, what type of income they would generate, revenue.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming that the development strategies did not include revenue from the site to the county, correct? From taxes. It was only from the land value.
Not as part of this initial analysis, no.
Okay.
All right. And then I did receive, since Reverend Middleton mentioned it, something from a group called Cardinal Capital Management. Walt, I'm going to ask you, Mr. Smalls, apologies. Have we received offers to build stuff on this site? Or we
Received full bids to buy it.
did it offer yet? Okay. We've received offers to purchase? Okay. All right. And then I think that covers it. But thank you all so much.
Okay, so what I would ask is that you be available at 5:30 on Tuesday. So if anybody got any follow-up questions after you send out that report, so they can study it over the weekend and then look at it on Monday and then come back on Tuesday with some questions. So can you are you available at 5:30 on Tuesday?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
may I
sir.
ask the consultant's question?
Yes, sir.
Is the two scenarios that you heard Councilwoman Honeycutt ask for, would those be available before Tuesday?
It should be.
In terms of the opportunity zone analysis and the tax analysis?
Oh, no, we wouldn't be able to.
That's what I-
We wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, I'll ask our department to do it then. If y'all can't do it, then I guess we can ask our finance department to do it. Seems like to me that should be fairly, not complicated, but fairly easy to do. So, I'll ask our department to do it. If you can't have it, I'm sure they can have it, just some type of estimate. You good with that, Ms. Honeycutt? All right, so Corinne, you and your staff, if you could, work on something to maybe bring back to us on Tuesday. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just gives her some type of scenario.
And it can assume rent values. I mean, I don't care how you do it. I just want some perspective on once we build out, whether it's 700 units, 800 units, whatever, what that would generate. What does that look like?
I'll talk to the assessor's office about what they can do.
Thank you.
All right, okay, Reverend Middleton, and then we're gonna wrap it up because we got to go to our next meeting.
Right, I see you have recommendation, if any, so what are we hoping to recommend from
Well,
this presentation?
That'll be something we discuss on Tuesday. I mean, they weren't labeled with bringing a recommendation, they were just labeled with bringing 3 scenarios, and then as council would make a recommendation. We may say, no, we're not gonna go with either one of them, we choose something else.
Right.
So that's up to council. I don't, they're not political. All they want to do is come in and give us a scenario we asked for. So if somebody got an idea on something different, bring the idea and we'll look at it.
Thank you.
Okay? Mr. Sass, and then you're going to be the last one.
Thank you, sir. I had a question. I know that there were some retail components on these different scenarios, and there were, and I had a couple of questions about the income. Certainly, the units would produce, the residential units would produce income. The retail, is that like at about a 90% occupancy, or what kind of occupancy rate did y'all calculate on all that kind of stuff like that? And does the parking generate any income, or is that no parking income? Is all that in the study that you were going to get?
I'll chime in on that question. Yes, there was a vacancy factor that for the retail space, and parking revenue was incorporated primarily from the residential component, because generally that's how structured parking is paid for over the long term. But I think that's another variable in terms of parking allocation for the retail component and what could be leveraged on other sites.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pryor.
Mr. Moody,
I'd like to just.
I did have a. Well, I had another.
Can you hold that to a Tuesday?
I really can't.
All right, this is it, because guys, we got to move
Because
on.
I think it's unfair to task Ms. Altenheim with doing this. I'm not sure while we're breaking our neck to get to Tuesday about, but these guys, we've hired these consultants, they know this business. We gave them a limited parameter of work to do. Now we've asked additional questions of Mr. Davis. Why not let Mr. Davis take this information, work with these consultants, and fold it in so that these people own it?
Good point.
They own it.
Let's wait until see what staff is going to do. I mean, we on this council have done.
not fa-
Hold on now. I'll let you speak.
Go ahead.
We on this council have done things in faster time than that. If we like something, we task staff to do it and say, I want it right away. If we not attached to something, then we just say, let's drag it out. So I think to be fair, let staff do it with Honeycutt Acts, and if they come back and say they can't do it, then we move from there. Okay, but I think when you say you task a consultant, we tasked them with one thing, and that was to give us the scenarios. They give us the scenarios now, so now we have to get involved to see where we go. The majority may say A, B, or C, or the majority may say, no, let's go to D. So I think that's what we need to do. We may not make a decision on Tuesday. It all depends on the information we get.
My point is, if we were going to ask finance and everybody internally to do it, why did we need to hire these consultants? We could have just had our staff do it from the
Well,
get-go.
I said that before, but then the majority of the council said hire a consultant.
Mr.
We're
Chair.
going to move on. We're not going to debate this.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I don't want to debate it.
No,
but
but
I
we need
certainly-
to move on.
I know, I certainly want to be fair and just,
The
because I know
experts.
sometimes we throw things out directing staff to do certain things that they cannot necessarily do in the time frame. And I just saw some people twisting into knots at the request. So I'm being serious, because I want us to be realistic. And then if they can't come back on Tuesday with something thoughtful, reasonable, and that's been done with due diligence, then we need to know that right now, as opposed to having expectations and then Tuesday it doesn't happen because they just could not produce that in that time frame.
My issue is not that we get it in time, but that we have it before we have to vote on it. And so if it's something that they don't feel comfortable doing, I have no problem with the consultant doing. I just want that information before we vote blindly on leasing land for $1 for 99 years versus selling a portion of it for $25 million. I think those are very important questions to ask and know the answers to before making a decision.
Okay. You'd like to speak, madam?
It would be a pretty fast turnaround time for the assessor's office. They would actually have to contact the consultants to find out what they're talking about because they've not seen any of this before.
Right.
Could we make it on Tuesday? How good would the data be? It'd be as good as we can do. My preference would be that we take some more time with it. Certainly if the consultants want to talk to the assessor's office, and they may, about some values and what that might mean, we're available for that. Turnaround time, the guarantee of what you'll get, the quality on Tuesday, I can't guarantee it.
Well, thank you for your candor.
Okay. So how much time do you think you'll need to get a quality report?
Nothing to do with it. They're the most
I-
qualified.
Sirs, please, let her speak for herself.
Honestly, I can't estimate that right now. I'd have to talk to the folks in the assessor's office. We'd have to arrange the conversations with the consultants. So I can't tell you tonight what kind of time we're going to need.
The best thing to do is have our revitalization department just work with our assessor's office, because I do think they need good data from our assessor's office as well.
Davis, what do you think? You leading this up.
Okay, if council is comfortable with the assumptions that have been made, because these are not set in stone. We have not met with the city's planning department or anything. If council is comfortable with the assumptions that they've made, we can move forward with doing some analysis on some actual built scenarios. Now, there's one I want to make clear, which is option 2, all affordable. That is not based on what will fit on the site. That was based predominantly on tax credits. And, for instance, SC Housing they're contemplating a new rule that says you can't get an award within a half mile of another award for 2 years. So if we were to build one on that site, we'd have to wait 2 years before we could even apply again. So that's where they're not trying to artificially deflate the number of affordable units. I can have them do a scenario of what it would cost if the county decided to, we really want to go all in, we want to build all affordable. We can do that scenario and show how much money it would be out of the county's pocket or out of other resources, et cetera. So again, to make a long story short, if council is comfortable with their assumptions, gentlemen, how long do you think it would take for us to do a financial analysis of the scenarios presented? A built analysis?
Being perfectly honest, it's very hard for me in this economy to estimate without talking to my staff and team and understanding what they're committed to and what time frame that we could do that without having a conversation. The best I could offer is to offer an estimate of time sometime tomorrow, but I can't do that at this time.
Mr. Werman, go ahead and then we shut it out.
Mr. Pryor, I'd suggest that, listen, there's always going to be more questions. We can value those more or less. We've got a meeting set on Tuesday. We're going to find out how long it's going to take for all these various folks to find out this more information. I think we just move on. We can sort this out on Friday, and then folks can just have to make a decision on Tuesday as to how much they think we need to hear this extra analysis or not.
I move to table this committee item until the next finance committee meeting.
Moved and seconded. Okay, call the roll.
Ms. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
I'm really undecided with this. So your motion is to move for
Table
tabling
until the
it
next finance committee meeting in order to gather some of this information.
Which is on
2 weeks from
Tuesday.
now.
October 20th?
No, the next regularly scheduled finance committee meeting, not Tuesday. Again, I don't want to condense the committee meeting and the council meeting on the same day. That just gives you no time, gives the public no time to respond, gives the council members no
Mr.
time
Suarez.
to study the details of the issue.
With all due respect, you're getting the information now. You're not getting the information
I think
on
what we've
Tuesday.
discovered is the lack of information now.
Well, yeah, but a lot of time we do meetings like this, but that's your motion, vote on it. But I think that we just gonna keep punting and punting and punting until we get it to go the way we want it. And I'm not in favor of that. We got to do something. It seems like to me when it always comes to poor people, delay. But when it comes to a big project that we want, let's speed it up. Let's get it done. Ms. Johnson.
Okay, all right. I still need some clarification here. So if the next meeting would be when, Ms.
October 20th.
20th? Or we just gonna hear whatever could be brought to us on Tuesday, and we don't know if we're gonna have all of that, right?
And we may not make a decision on Tuesday.
Did you say you were gonna have some information on Tuesday?
I will talk to the assessor's office and ask them to talk to the consultants about what they have proposed, but I cannot guarantee the quality of what council would receive in that short period of turnaround time.
Okay, so we can discuss this on Tuesday and then
Yes.
make a decision?
Right.
Okay, I'll go with that.
So you're voting no against this?
Right.
All right, the next person, please.
Mr. Middleton.
Aye.
Mr. Moody.
Aye.
Mr. Sass.
Aye.
Mr. Schwiers.
Aye.
Mr. Werman.
Nay.
Mr. Pryor.
No.
The motion passes 2, 3, 4, 5 ayes, 1, 2, 3 nays, and 1 absent.
We move on to the next
Monday's a holiday.
environmental management meeting. Mr. Moody, I'm gonna turn this over to you.
I appreciate you starting this for me earlier. I want to announce the members of the committee, myself as chair, Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Sass, Mr. Werman, and Chairman Pryor sits on all items. Item 3A is a collections update, and we have our partners from Republic here to speak with us. We're about 120, 150 days into our contract
That's about right.
with
Yes, sir.
Republic. So if you guys, at very high level, whoever would like to come forward, introduce your team, and tell us what you're seeing out there. We'd like to hear how things have been going, some of the challenges. Ms. Ham has briefed us on some of the challenges from prior to handing off, but I'd like to see where you guys have found trouble and where you're working to improve.
The minutes. You need to get the
Oh, did we
minutes.
not do those first? I'm sorry. Hold just tight. I thought we'd gotten those. Item 2A, I'm sorry, minutes for the June 16 meeting.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Miss.
No,
thank
I'm
you.
not on this one. Sorry, Anna.
I'll
You
move
can
for
second.
approval.
Mr. Pryor
second.
moves.
I'll second.
Mr. Sass seconds. Jenny was not on there. Any deletions, additions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. That settles that one. We took care of executive session. Now, sir, you're up.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, council
Thank
members,
you,
and
sir.
staff.
Good evening.
Thank you all for your time this evening. My name is Brady Lesh with Republic Services. I'm the area vice president for the southern portion of our mid-Atlantic area, which covers from South Georgia up to Charlotte. We have a few folks here that are with me that I'll introduce as well from our area team and from our local business unit management. Tracy Nestor is our area senior municipal manager. Sean Brown is our operations manager that oversees the active collection of this contract. Jay DeHaan's the general manager that oversees the business unit that oversees the services that are provided from the collection side. Rob Carter is our municipal manager, local municipal manager. And we've also got Shane Walker, who is our area president over the mid-Atlantic area from Baltimore down to South Georgia, as we had mentioned just a moment ago. So as an update to the contract, I'll move forward here. As you all are aware, the contract was begun on June 6th of this year, executed in October of last year, so quite a bit of time of preparation and discussion to get prepared for this new contract. 160,000 residential customers that go every other week for their collection, over 11,000 commercial carded customers that we service on a weekly basis throughout the downtown area and throughout the county, and over 1,000 front load or commercial stops that are serviced, from the county as well. So these are previously routes, as you know, that the county was servicing for recycle collections. So just to highlight some preparation and some things that we did as an organization to get prepared for this work, working with the county. Route audits to safely assess the issues in difficult service areas to make sure that we understood what these routes look like to try to mitigate issues as we went throughout the early stages of the contract and set this up for the most success. A routing plan that minimized the number of day changes. We actually ended up with a number somewhere around 28,000 day changes. We were trying to minimize the number of day changes to mitigate issues as much as possible through the service of this contract in the early portions of it and the out portions of it. And then bi-weekly and then ultimately weekly calls with the county to understand, any nuances or things that we need to be prepared for, to discuss assets, people, routes, any changes that may need to be made, any mitigating circumstances that may arise that we can respond to and handle appropriately. Moving forward a little bit more, so on-site meeting cadence with county employees. We had our local HR team that met with the county employees every Thursday morning to make herself available for any questions or comments, allay any concerns that the frontline employees coming from the county to Republic may have, and try to provide them with as much information as possible through those early months where there may be some ambiguity or an uncertainty in joining Republic. And then for the few months before the contract began, there was some supplemental support that Republic gave to the county to help, with the transition of the contract. We wanted to make sure that it was in the best situation possible as we transitioned over, so that it was as seamless as possible to the citizens, given that there was going to be a number of day changes already kind of existing and going on. With the defection of some employees and some of the challenges from a staffing and truck perspective, we wanted to offer whatever support we could to try to mitigate that as much as possible early on. And then additional support brought in from, multiple sites. So this is quite the undertaking, 160,000 homes going every other week, spread all over the county. We did go through, a number of exercises bringing in support trucks, people from other markets and other parts of Republic services in our area to try to support with this transition and ease whatever concerns we could as it transitioned. All right, so some statistics and some data. Councilman, you mentioned 16 weeks, 150, 160 days into the contract. We wanted to bring up a trend of the number of missed pickups that have been called in. This is data that came from the county's tower system. On the left-hand side, you'll see the number of misses, the corresponding week, and the corresponding number of services that came with that. There's also a missed pickup percentage. In total, for the first 16 weeks, it's a little under 0.5%, with the last few weeks being around 0.2, 0.3% in terms of collection and missed pickup opportunities. And you can see the trend line and trend graph for those service opportunities there on that slide as well. So certainly some opportunities as we move forward with this contract, and some things that we've done internally to better manage and to prepare ourselves for the circumstances that we've encountered as we've gone through this work. We've got a continued emphasis on staffing and driver acclimation. As you might expect, with 160,000 customers going every other week and the number of routes that we run, driver acclimation, with only seeing the stops 8 times, really, if you think about 16 weeks divided by 2, it is an opportunity for us, and to continue to help them learn, get acclimated, and get adjusted to those routes, and prepare them to better service those stops on an ongoing basis. We made the decision to hire an additional operations manager. So the kind of initial phase for us was to have one operations manager overseeing this contract and our existing business. We've gone forth with a plan to hire another operations manager that heavily oversees and monitors this contract specifically, and that's Sean Brown, who I introduced earlier. And she's been on board and in that role now for about 2 to 3 weeks. We certainly expect her to have a very positive impact. Additionally, we've given her another supervisor to help support this as well. We had initially modeled and considered having one supervisor to work and support this particular contract, and realized quickly that we were going to need additional support, and added that second supervisor to help with this contract. The operational focus, and I think this is probably the biggest opportunity for Republic as we move forward, is the repeated misses and the repeated customers. So, the alleyways and stops that we've got to get a fine tune and make sure that we are not having the duplicative number of misses on those given streets. And that's a process that Sean is actively working on a routine basis, root causing where those stops are, meeting with the drivers, having conversations about those stops, making sure they understand where it is on their map, and also understanding, secondary, multiple calls that we're receiving on a given street or a given address. Sean is actively working on that process, and we have seen some reduction here in recent weeks on those numbers. Additional commercial cart collection route to be run each Monday. One of the things that we've kind of discovered is that given the route structure on the commercial side, and we did not make any route adjustments initially on the commercial side, but just given that route structure and some of the circumstances we've come across there, we need some additional support specifically on Mondays, and we've put that into effect to help service specifically the downtown area to mitigate concerns that you may have previously heard about or seen. And we have seen some success with that as well. And then just additionally, we are working to add an additional residential route on most service days to help mitigate just the number of services that are out there and add additional support. And let me be clear. So since the contract's begun, many of the weeks and days we've run additional routes to help with that service, but it's been supplemental in effect. For us to go back and add those routes in and tailor the routes accordingly, which takes some maneuvering and some adjusting, that takes a little more analysis. So we want to more effectively place those routes out there to help improve service, but we also want to do that without shocking the system and creating the same route acclimation and gaps that we may have experienced early on throughout the contract.
Mr. Lesh, thank you for your time in that presentation. For those of you, Mr. Kessler is on the screen as well, or behind you. Mr. Schweers, questions?
When a driver misses stops, what is the typical recovery time for that? Next day, or how quickly do y'all recover?
The recovery time should be 24 hours. We've mostly operated within a 48-hour window. Early on in the agreement, it was longer than that, certainly, and there's been times that it's been longer than that, but we want to achieve that within a 24-hour period, that recovery.
Okay, and y'all have a system in place to attempt to do it within 24 hours.
Yes, sir. We've got dedicated routes now that are scheduled to go out and service those routes, service those stops that get called in within that 24-hour period.
And the driver that missed those stops, I assume, is not the driver that goes back and services those stops.
Not in every circumstance, and that's really kind of based on the...
That can lead to repeat misses.
Yes, sir. And some of that's predicated on the way that the routes were set up previously within the county and that they're set up moving forward is you may have Mount Pleasant running on a Tuesday, but then you may have North Charleston running on a Friday. So you don't want to send the same driver back. It's an operational efficiency kind of thing. That's why we use those supplemental drivers to go back to collect any misses that they may have.
I mean, I sympathize with your logistics challenge. It's a huge undertaking, and I appreciate y'all's efforts. But I have been on the receiving end of a few of the calls, and people, as long as they get service next day, no harm, no foul. But we appreciate your efforts to do 100%.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Certainly an opportunity.
Reverend Middleton.
Yes, thank you very much. And I really do wish that all county committees are committees of the whole, because certainly, especially in this matter, I'm not on the committee officially, but am getting the brunt of a lot of these calls. So on the slide that you said 353, the trend lines, right, that one right there, because those 353 people, week 16. So we're now in the 16th week. And those 353 people, when looking at just, over time, it seems like, that is a target that seems to be a sweet spot of those that have been missed repeatedly. And I get the same calls from the same neighborhoods, from the same people, or, hodgepodge thereof, every single time. And so can you express to me, I know that, in any system, there are, variabilities and, built-in measures for any outliers to occur, but the same people every time. And so can we fix that and get that right?
Absolutely. And that's part of that root causing process that I mentioned earlier, is that those stops that have been repeatedly missed or repeatedly had concerns, Sean is going through those on a routine basis and on a rolling basis to understand last 4 to 5 weeks, what's going on with these particular stops and how do we target this from happening in the future. Some of that is, as we look through Tower, and we've worked with the county on getting this done, is identifying which routes belong to each stop in the system. So that's, as you could think, that's 160,000 residents that have to be manually entered with the number of routes or the route that it belongs to for better root cause purposing. But to your point, in the meantime, yes, that is something we are actively working on and primarily engaged with. As recently as last week, we started a daily meeting with the county and Republic to talk about performance from the previous day and any specific items, just such to your point right there, that we're addressing to make sure that we don't get those outstanding issues that come to council or get escalated to higher levels of staff.
Well, because around about week 4 through week 16, we're kind of teeter-tottering in the same sort of number of individuals, and that's only those that were captured in that system. There are so many others that may not have reported and or called in that still are also affected. So that number could be multiplied by,
Certainly. And to that point, if there are issues or circumstances that others are being made aware of that are not coming through staff or not coming to Republic, it's certainly more difficult for us to try to address those specific circumstances. So As those arise, if, staff goes through them and identifies that they have not previously called in, there is a process for them to communicate that to us and help root cause it. And certainly, to your point, there's an opportunity for us to be better with those repeated misses.
And then lastly, in other areas where you service, I mean, is this trend line typical, or do you try to get down to like zero?
That's a very difficult question to answer directly. You think about every service type is a different type of, kind of service circumstance, if you will. On an every other week type service, there's kind of different expectations and things that you would see. You have more tighter municipalities, you have more spread out county work. So there's a myriad of answers kind of in theories to that. So I'd hate to conject or say what that number should be. I don't think that that would be the number I would give would be indicative of what you would think would be acceptable. But, really, if you think about, less than 0.5% in terms of, service reliability, that's a pretty strong number. Now, the opportunity for us is, like you said, the repeat misses, not having those duplicative number of issues kind of flow through, and seeing that number reduce that way.
What then would be your industry standard, or what's the benchmark within Republic that you're trying to get in your delivery services here?
We would think between 1/4 and 0.5% would be a solid, solid service perspective.
All right, thank you very much.
Honeycutt.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I appreciate the use of the word opportunity so many times. I understand the challenges faced here. And one of the things I noticed in my district is there were a number of routes where the type of vehicle used couldn't fit in the route. And so I understand logistical challenges like that. But what are we doing to analyze the route audits, whatever system y'all use, to ensure that one answer I've gotten when I get missed pickups is that your driver can't drive anymore. So they have a limited number of hours they can spend behind the wheel. And I understand that. But are we then taking houses off their route so that they're not confronted every time with leaving that last half the street? Or what are you doing to address that?
And that's part of the adjustment that we spoke about earlier, was that Monday route specifically. If you're talking about some of the smaller trucks, smaller applications, that route specifically is to alleviate some of those concerns on Monday, where we may have had routes that got left on those smaller routes, the 20-yard trucks or the 9-yard trucks that are down there servicing primarily downtown area. That route specifically is to help alleviate the pressures on Monday that may be causing or exacerbating issues throughout the remainder of the week. And that's the rationale for adding that route. Now, that particular area where those smaller trucks operate is going to need a route adjustment. And that's going to have to happen sometime in the near future. We did not want to cause major disruption initially with the contract by changing that and making adjustments to the residential collection. So we tried our best to keep with the same service that the county had performed earlier and originally with the contract.
Well, thank you. My district is a Monday route, so I'm glad we're looking into this, but I would love to get to that place as soon as possible.
Sure,
Thank
absolutely. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
Oh, yes, sir. I do have a question in reference to the convenience centers out in the rural areas. During the storm, our normal closing was on Saturday, and I got a complaint about people who were bringing the debris from the storm to the location and found that it was closed. So I'm just wondering, how do we handle, openings if there is a storm?
Mrs. Ham.
Johnson, so that is a combination of Public Works and the Environmental Management Department typically kind of coordinate and make those decisions. A part of what you were feeling this weekend is the fact that the landfill was not open because it needed to assess from the storm and redistribute the garbage that's out there so that it could prepare to take in garbage on Monday. So some of that is stemming from the storm and the decisions that were made at the leadership level. But that would not have involved Republic.
Okay, but they are operating in the rural areas. And so if you are in a place like Wadmalaw, the people would have to bring the debris from Wadmalaw to Bees Ferry.
Ms. Johnson, let me suggest maybe we take that offline, because we're talking about recycling collection, so I don't want to get off of their primary task for being here. So if you don't mind, let's
Well,
maybe circle.
we can do that, but they are the ones that's responsible for the convenience centers?
No.
No, they're not doing that part. Okay, only the pickup. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Good. Mr. Werman?
I think most of my questions have been covered. I look forward to receiving less calls.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sass?
Thank you. I agree. I have some smaller streets in my district as well, and so the smaller trucks have to come pick those up. And I realize they get filled up faster, and so then they've got to go get emptied. And but I appreciate y'all working hard, and I think that I like hearing what we're hearing tonight. Thank you for addressing these items. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Middleton?
A question, is there going to be another time where they will come back and give an update based on improvements?
As we request, I think it makes sense to have, 90 to 150 day periods. We've got some data to analyze, but let me wrap this up. Ms. Salisbury, if you'll call out for the public's record the email address where they can send their, or Jenny had it right off the top of her head.
Recycle@charlestoncounty.org.
Thank you. I have been as guilty, I think, as we all have of texting either our ombudsman or the county attorney and saying, hey, or Mr. Tootin and saying, hey, I see this. We all, I think 9 of us have got to get better about making sure that even we are sending those emails to recycle email address so that we can get these counts, because I don't think 353 is probably representative of the total number when you factor in all the things that we probably are doing. Just 2 quick points I'll make. One, I agree with all the nooks and crannies in the county that we're missing, and those are tough to get to, but I'm going to flip it around and tell you one thing I see that makes me scratch my head in my district in West Ashley is I'll be riding down the street and Sam Rittenberg Boulevard is not picked up. I see blue carts on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard, and you have to go by those to get into the neighborhoods back behind there, or conversely on Old Town Road near Charlestown Landing. There will be carts along a major highway, a state highway, yet all the neighborhoods behind those roads have been serviced. And you had to see them going in, you had to see them coming out. So that's just one of the head scratchers that I've seen going on. But one question I did have for you is you outlined that we started in October 21 with contract. We started June 6 with the actual operations. We are aware of some of the data shortcomings the county had, but are there any things that Republic could have done better to be more ready for this? Because I think we all saw, and Mr. Kessler even told us, we're going to have a lot of hiccups the first 90 days, and we did, and it kind of came down, and then I think we've all the last month or two kind of seen them tick back up a little bit. So is there anything Republic could have done better in that 7-month time frame to make sure we were ready?
Yeah, I would say, from estimating kind of from a staffing perspective and a preparation with people and acclimation and making sure that they understood, route impacts and what was going to be happening. I would say, in hindsight, having more drivers available through Republic Services prior to the start of the agreement with a higher level of acclimation and kind of aptitude around the routes that we service would probably be something that we would go back and look at as a key opportunity during the transition. Obviously, from October to June of this year, the world changed quite a bit in terms of staffing challenges, people challenges, asset challenges, just rental trucks, the cost of rental trucks going up, the availability of rental trucks, a number of different things that have kind of impacted our business and, business throughout the community. But more specifically, more drivers, more driver acclimation, more route acclimation in preparation for a transition, knowing that there would probably be some defection and some changes that occurred through the process.
Mr. Last, thank you and your team for being here this evening, and we'll look forward to another update, as Mr. Middleton said, maybe another 90 days or whatever Mrs. Ham thinks or Mr. Kessler thinks is a good another data set to examine, because as Mr. Werman indicated, and I think Jenny or Ms. Honeycutt said, the opportunities are there for both sides. So we want things quiet, we want things collected, and we want things, you'd earn every dollar you're entitled to be earned. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, we'll call this Environmental Management Committee meeting to an end, and that'll end our evening.
Thank you, sir. We move into our special county council meeting. The first item is the Freedom of Information Act. Ms. Salisbury.
In compliance with the Freedom of Information Act, notice of meeting was posted and agendas were distributed to news media and persons requesting notification.
So there's a request to rescind our
Second.
in state of emergency. It's moved by Mr. Moody. Who seconded?
Second.
Ms. Honeycutt. Okay, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Anything else to come before this body? adjourned.
Mr. Chairman, you got a few minutes?
Yeah, I gotta run in the back for a minute, but I wanna, I'll be in the back, I'll be in my office.
I'll meet you in your office
Yeah,
in
give
just
me a
a few
couple of
minutes.
minutes. I wanna see that young man right there.
I noticed that it was